want to welcome you to our YouTube channel, Escaping the Revolving Door. I'm John LeMaster. You're viewing the first session of a 12-session course entitled Escaping the Revolving Door of Prison. In this first session, we'll be presenting an overview of the main points of the entire course, but also we'll be giving you some background information as to how this course of study came about in the first place. There's a lot to cover in this session. There's a whole lot of PowerPoints, so I hope you'll hang in there with us. This term, revolving door of prison, is often used to describe the difficulty that face those who've committed a crime and been sentenced to serve time in prison, because a large number of these men and women released from prison end up right back there again because of their tendency to relapse and commit another crime, or break the rules of their parole even, which of course sends them right back to prison to serve the rest of their sentence. This life-changing group of classes has been developed as an aid for you who are in prison right now. It's also intended for those of you who have been recently released, and maybe you're at home now, or perhaps you're in a transitional facility, or basically it's for anyone wanting to know a little bit more about how to break free of their negative past. If you think you've made such a complete mess of your life that you're never going to recover from all the effects of the poor choices you've made, I want to assure you this video has been made especially for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below and give us a thumbs up, if you will, if you find this video helpful. Would you also give us some feedback information as in the comments section as to how we might go about improving your viewing experience on our channel? My wife, Kathleen, and I have been teaching this 12-session course with a lot of success in various prisons in northern Kentucky and southern Indiana since 2015. We've graduated a total of 530 men and women who rate this course of study very highly. Those who sign up for the course in prison get so inspired and excited about the course content that after just the first session, they convince their dorm mates to attend the course along with them, and so that our attendance often doubles from 35 or 40 who initially sign up to sometimes 70 or 80 and even higher numbers. Inmates have told us some very encouraging information about the positive effects of this course, that they know of only one person who's reoffended and been sent back to prison for another offense after graduating from our course. Wow, that's an extremely encouraging statistic to us. Since we have no way of tracking our graduates, we have to depend on the word of mouth of inmates for that kind of information. The response of inmates has been so overwhelming that it's been suggested that we video the entire course series we teach in prison, put it on YouTube, and also release it on DVDs for general distribution so we can reach far more inmates in a shorter length of time. At the end of our prison 12-session course, we give out a questionnaire for inmates to fill out to give us some feedback as to the benefits of the course and how it can be improved. One of the 5 questions we ask is, do you feel this course has helped you become a successful member of society again when you're released? Here's some of the written responses. Very much so, John. It's helped me by giving me a good understanding as to why I make bad choices and decisions sometimes. Another inmate wrote, very helpful. It's opened my eyes to know that I can be a success when I'm released from prison. And then another said, this course should be a requirement for every inmate to take before they're released from prison. You know, I could spend 15 or 20 minutes or more reading comments like this from written responses we've received. Since we're not underwritten by any organization, these comments really make what we're doing worth our time, our effort, and our expense. My wife and I started out teaching in various prisons about 10 years ago at the request of friends of ours who were involved in teaching Bible study classes in prison. We even started ourselves by teaching Bible study classes. and then went on to teaching the Alcoholics Anonymous program that I think many of you are probably familiar with. After several years of doing this, we began to see the necessity of having a more inclusive course of study that not only used the Bible, but also included various other valuable resources to help men and women in prison become truly rehabilitated. After reading various articles on the tendency of former inmates to reoffend, we became very alarmed at the statistics of those being released from jail and prison. According to a report issued by the United States Bureau of Justice, as you see on your screen here, that tracked 405,000 prison inmates, 68% were arrested for a new crime within 3 years of their release, and 77% were released within 5 years. Wow, that's an astonishing statistic that sadly continues year after year. As you probably know, this term recidivism is used to describe the percentage of previous offenders who commit other crimes after release from prison because of this tendency to reoffend that I just mentioned. But you may not know that this word recidivism comes from a Latin root word meaning to repeat or recycle. You know, I like to see people recycle aluminum cans and plastic bottles, as you see here, but I never want to see men and women recycled to any correctional facility. We've just got to find a better way to lower the recidivism rate of previous offenders and not recycle them again and again to prison, like them being stuck in a revolving door. Of course, that's where we came up with the title for our course. The state and federal prison system has put into place a number of courses and classes to try to address these alarming statistics. But a whole lot more needs to be done to assist inmates, because 95% of you in prison today are going to be released back into the community at some point, which is a fantastic reason for you to do everything you can to change the behavior that got you sent to prison in the first place. That's why we've developed this course series. We're doing our best to give you the tools you need to change the statistics we've just mentioned so that most of you never return. In fact, that's exactly what we hope for and we believe it will happen as you study this course. I want you to be aware that I may at times come across like a motivational speaker that simply challenges and inspires and tries to get you fired up through a pep talk. But I want to do more than that. I want to go far beyond just motivating you for a short time. I want to instill in you that your life really matters in the grand scheme of things. No one's life is a mistake, like one inmate told us. You were born on purpose for a purpose. And if you don't reach the destiny that God intended for you, then all of us will be deprived of what you would have accomplished. You see, if you don't do it, God has no plan B for someone else to do what only you can do. I don't know how you feel, but according to Jeremiah 29:11 in the Bible, it's in the Old Testament, God has a plan for your life. I'd like for you to take a look at that scripture. Look it up for yourself and let it speak directly to you. But for his plan to come to pass in your life, it takes your cooperation. You see, this thing is a cooperative effort. God can't do your part, and you can't do his part. Secondly, in this course, I want to mess with your mind a little bit. Will you give me permission to do that? I hope you will. I want to challenge you to begin to change the way you think about yourself. Who do you think you are down deep inside? Because the person you think you are will determine your actions, what you'll end up doing in life. It will determine your behavior. It'll end up determining your destiny. You might be saying, John, how in the world can that be? Well, let's look at it. If you think of yourself as an alcoholic or a drug addict or a criminal, what are you going to do? You're going to do those behaviors exactly what those words you're going to drink to excess. You're going to continue or start a drug habit, and you're going to end up breaking the law and end up imprisoning. Oh, sure, you may be able to get away from breaking the law for a short period, but eventually that behavior will result in you being sent to prison. But if you see yourself differently, it will begin to change you from the inside. It'll change your thoughts. It'll change your emotions, and it'll end up changing your behavior. You'll begin learning to make better choices and doing positive things that we will teach you in this course how to do, and that'll bring rewards and not regrets. The prison system emphasizes and constantly reinforces to you that you're felons, that you're failures. But making a mistake doesn't make you a failure, even making several mistakes, because, you see, I say you can change your behavior. You can become a success when you're released from prison. You don't have to repeat all those behaviors that got you there. We will emphasize and reinforce that if you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that you're now a mighty man of God or a mighty woman of God. In our in-prison course, we start out each class asking inmates in attendance, "Who are you?" And they shout it out loud. We're mighty men of God. I'm going to do the same thing in this video. Who are you? I want you to speak it out wherever you are. I'm a mighty man of God, or I'm a mighty woman of God. Don't think of your time in prison or jail as punishment like the system tells you it is, but what you really need to do is think of it as time in the training room, where you do the necessary things you need to prepare yourself to make yourself stronger. You men and women that played sports are very familiar with the training room. If you wanted to be successful on the field, what'd you have to do? You have to build yourself up in the training room. It wasn't fun. It took a lot of effort. You even had to work up a lot of sweat. But it was absolutely necessary to bring about the positive results in you for you to be successful on the field. If you think of your time here in prison as punishment, I guarantee you it's not going to make you better. It's going to make you bitter. And that bitterness will cause you to repeat the behaviors that got you sent to prison in the first place. I'd like for us to try together to understand why 7 or 8 out of 10 inmates, according to the statistics I just mentioned, return or choose to return to prison. But you say, wait a minute, John. Men and women don't choose to return to prison. But you know, there's an old proverb that says, if you don't have a plan for success, you're planning to fail. I think everyone who leaves prison who is determined, wow, I'm never coming back to this place again. But what causes someone to fall back into old habits or let their guard down to the point that they end up reoffending and being returned to prison to serve another sentence? One member of our class in Branchville Corrections in Branchville, Indiana, gave us his reason. He said, John, you know, after 3 or 4 months, I forgot how bad prison life was. It seemed that time just dulls the memory of that terrible prison experience after a while. So what do you think causes men and women to be repeat offenders? In 2015, I posed this question to the inmates at a correctional facility where my wife and I were teaching Bible study classes, like I mentioned, on a Saturday night. We were basically just trying to determine what factors contributed or caused a high rate of reoffending among previous offenders. We thought, you know, this isn't rocket science. Isn't being removed from society and placed in a facility away from their friends and family and having to be subjected to the rough and tough conditions in prison? You know, I've heard it all. Bad food, poor sleeping quarters, housed along with inconsiderate and sometimes malicious other offenders, and, of course, the loneliness of prison. Isn't that enough to keep them from reoffending? we thought, what better way is there to find out what the causes of reoffending are than to ask inmates directly? I remember it well. There were many responses that night. We wrote down the reasons they gave us on a dry erase board that was located right behind us. And we copied those responses down after class, began to study them, and began to categorize them into what we found were 7 major contributors to reoffending. After identifying these 7 factors, we spent about a year doing comprehensive research on them and developed a teaching on each factor. And then one by one taught the men what could be done to lessen or eliminate the power and influence these causes had on them. Don't worry about trying to remember all these 7 points that are on the screen now, because we'll be covering each one in a lot more detail later on in this video. Finally, this series of teachings was assembled into this 12-session course, Escaping the Revolving Door of Prison, that I hope and pray you'll continue to watch. There are 12 classes because 4 of the 7 major factors take 2 classes to cover more thoroughly. What makes this course of study so powerful is that it came about from the real-life experiences of inmates in prison just like you, who had offended and then later reoffended. We found their reasons for offending are very common to those who are in prison. And now you are going to profit from what they told us were the reasons they offended. I want you to be aware that this class is not a Bible study, but we will glean principles from the Bible. But we will also be using information that we've gathered in our research utilizing studies done in the field of psychology and sociology and counseling and even in the world of business, so that everything that we're going to be giving you are all the resources that we've found to be able to help you be successful when you're released. By the way, we want you to know we have extensive handouts on each of these subjects covered in the course. These are the very same handouts we give each inmate who attends our in-prison classes. These will be available as a free download in our bookstore section of our website, lamasterministries.com. It's our hope that if you're in prison now, that the institution will provide the copies of each class handout for you to study and to keep. In this course, we'll be studying in detail each of the 7 major contributors to reoffending that I mentioned earlier. Now let's get into an overview of the 12 classes. Now, obviously, class number 1, you're looking at it. You're viewing it right now. It's a brief description of what's contained in each of the 12 classes. In class number 2, entitled Choosing Prosocial and Avoiding Antisocial Friends, we'll be covering the first reason for reoffending the men gave us. They said they surrounded themselves with antisocial friends. Now, those words, surrounded themselves with antisocial friends, are my words. What the men actually said was that they had associated themselves with bad women and bad friends. One guy said he thought about 75% of men in prison were there because of a bad woman or bad women. That's so funny, because the women in prison who've attended our classes say, it's bad men, John. Don't listen. It's bad men that caused me to end up in prison. What were they saying when they said that? Well, they were saying that they had surrounded themselves with people who were rebellious and antisocial that had a negative influence on them. Antisocial is defined this way. It's used to describe people exhibiting any sort of behavior that's contrary to the laws and customs of society with the intent to violate the rights of others. The first key point we will learn in this class is that the attitudes and opinions of others tend to shape us and influence our decisions because of peer pressure. Since no one wants to be rejected by their friends or even look down on them, we may go along with what they want to do just to be accepted by them and not necessarily what we want to do. So we need to choose our friends very carefully. Sometimes it's even necessary to remove yourself from your negative environment because those old friends will keep you enslaved to your past. A previous member of this class told us, he said, John, I know I can't go back to my hometown when I'm released because those old friends will be drawing me right back into my old lifestyle that'll end up leading me right back to prison. Rather than moving back to his hometown, I suggested he move to a town about 30 or 40 miles away so that he could still be close enough to his kids to maintain contact with them. That's being a good father. But without being too close to those who would influence him negatively. The second key point we'll learn is how to recognize what kind of influence our friends will have on us by giving them a little mental test. No, I don't want you to take out a sheet of paper when you're talking to your friends, but to start taking mental notes of what your friends talk about. What do they think about, reflect on, visualize, daydream about, sometimes even fantasize about? If they talk about how high they got on that last drug and they wish they could find some more, or how much smarter they're going to be about committing a crime so they won't get caught next time, they're telling you what kind of influence they will have on you. By the way, these people aren't your friends. True friends want to help you attain your goals and be successful when you're released, not help you return to prison. They're like poisonous snakes hidden in the grass. Their bite will cause you a lot of harm. These so-called friends have aligned themselves with you because they think you're just like them, antisocial, and want to continue in that direction in your life. But you know you really don't want to. In this class, we'll also discuss 3 ways that you can use to limit your exposure to these people. Notice I said limit your exposure to them. You don't have to totally quit associating with these negative friends, but you'll certainly have to learn how to set boundaries with them by learning how to say no to their demands, which is the third key point we will learn. There's a book by that title, Boundaries, When to Say Yes and How to Say No, by 2 guys, Henry Cloud and John Townsend. I'd like to recommend you to read it. It'll give you a lot of insight into the benefits of setting boundaries. Someone has said that every influential person in your life is either making a deposit to your success in life or they're making a withdrawal to drain away that success. In class number 3, entitled Making Better Choices Based on Convictions, we'll begin to cover the second reason for reoffending the men gave us. They had a tendency to make poor choices. This is going to be a 2-part series, so we'll cover that. This is part 1. We'll cover this one in classes 3 and number 4. But in class 3, we're going to glean principles for making choices by looking at the role convictions play in our lives that help us make good choices. Well, what are convictions anyway? They're firmly fixed beliefs that a person accepts as true and that resists all compromise. So we're prone to making poor choices when we base those choices solely on our feelings. So it's very important to realize that tendency and use sound reasoning for making choices rather than doing it without giving it a lot of careful thought. In class number 4, entitled Making Better Choices by Avoiding Bad Choices, we will continue to cover the second reason for reoffending, they had a tendency to make poor choices. This study will consist of asking ourselves 5 questions before making choices, important choices, that will eliminate 75% or more of poor choices. Then we'll also look at 10 common mistakes that people make, and then 5 ways that businesses avoid making bad decisions that will help us make better choices. In class number 5, we'll look at the overcoming substance abuse, which was the third reason for reoffending that the men gave us. They had a tendency to engage in substance abuse. They either reestablished an old habit after being released, or they started taking drugs and or drinking alcohol to excess. In this class, we'll glean some principles from the Bible by identifying 5 beliefs and truths that empowered David in the Bible in defeating the 9-foot giant Goliath. Almost everyone has heard the story of David and Goliath. We will learn how to use these truths to defeat the giants in our lives. You might be saying, giants? What are you talking about, John? Well, everything from anger and bitterness to depression and discouragement, guilt and shame even, unforgiveness, worry, and then, of course, substance abuse. These and many others can be regarded as giants in our lives that keep us discouraged and in bondage and stand in the way of us fulfilling our purpose in life. The normal reaction to the giants in our lives is what? To get discouraged and to give up in despair. I think we can gain much from how David approached his giant and defeated him. Then we'll discuss what the Bible says about doing drugs. Well, I'll give you a little hint. It doesn't cover illicit drug use directly, but it's covered under the heading of the Greek word pharmakia that's used in Galatians 5:19 through 21. That's where we get our term that we're more familiar with, the word pharmacy. Pharmakia primarily denotes the administration and use of drugs and then poisoning. In other words, overdose. Overdoses from opiates have reached an epidemic proportion. More than 33,000 people in the United States have died from opiate overdoses during just 2015. We lost 72,000 people in the United States in 2017 from drug overdoses. The U.S. Surgeon General recently stated that the drug epidemic is becoming a moral test for America. Overdoses have killed over 500,000 people since the year 2000. I'm going to say something pretty provocative, but anyone who suggests to you that you should take drugs to get high on is trying to get you to accept a death sentence. A friend of mine who grew up in the drug culture told me that, John, more than 100 of my friends, my addict friends, whose daily activities revolved around drug use, have died of overdoses. As you many are aware, so many extremely talented and intelligent people have succumbed to the seductive charm of drug use and abuse and have become addicted. This class was going to teach you how to resist becoming addicted to drugs in the first place, but also how to break free of an addiction if you're already hooked. In class number 5, we'll also cover a section on why taking drugs gives that pleasurable feeling referred to as a high by discussing a little bit about brain chemistry and the release of the neurotransmitter dopamine. You probably heard that term before. When we receive a reward that gives us a sense of pleasure, Then we'll discuss 10 ways that we can increase the dopamine levels in our brains naturally that's legal and healthier and does not lead to addiction. Finally, we'll go into a lot of detail on overcoming drug abuse and addiction with a 7-step practical guide to overcoming drug addiction. You will learn how to beat an addiction with the perseverance and patience and help of the Lord, who came to bring us freedom. In class number 6, entitled Skills Assessment and Common Interview Questions, we'll begin to investigate how released inmates can go about securing suitable employment. The men in our class said they reoffended because they didn't possess adequate skills for finding a good job or didn't even know how. As a side comment, one man attending our class said, "The only job, John, I'm really good at is selling drugs." So we'd ask him, "How's that profession working for you?" He said, "Well, John, actually not very well. I made a lot of money in a short period of time, but it ended up leading to 2 terms in prison for selling drugs." Obviously, he needed to seek another profession. If he'd used those same abilities required to be a drug dealer, he could have been selling cars or insurance or any number of things and probably would have been a very successful person. Next, we'll be discussing that right now in the United States, there are 5.8 million jobs available that cannot be filled because employers can't find qualified applicants. To be able to qualify, you must apply yourself to learning skills that employers are looking for and be willing to be hired even as an apprentice or attend a trade school. I did that. I want to encourage you to take advantage of all the skills you can develop in prison. Well, no, wait a minute. Of course, I'm talking about those skills that will lead to a good paying legal profession on the outside when you're released. It's not necessary to borrow and spend $100,000 or more to attend college to be awarded a degree to get a good job. People in trade professions often make as much money, if not more, than a college graduate. And the cost to attend these schools is far less. And some companies are even willing to cover those costs entirely and pay you a salary. In fact, there are plenty of college grads, but there's a shortage of people that are trained in trades like machinists and auto mechanics and electricians, plumbers, even 18-wheel truck drivers. Trucking companies say they would hire 50,000 drivers right now if they could find them. And many are so desperate for drivers that they're willing to pay the training fees and guarantee that you'll pass and receive a CDL license while paying you a salary while being trained. A commercial driver's license is required to drive a big rig 18-wheeler, as you know. By the way, these drivers make some big kind of bucks, $65,000 minimum up to $100,000 a year. Am I saying, John, are you telling me not to attend college? Not at all. I'm saying there are many ways to begin a career or find an occupation that's suitable for you that'll pay an adequate salary and support you and your family. Also, we'll be covering how to classify your current skills and strengths by utilizing what are called the 3 Ps of marketing yourself: previous experience, portable skills, and personality factors. Think of yourself differently. Think of yourself as a marketing manager of yourself. Many people underestimate their abilities and strengths and so often don't include some very critical strengths they possess and put those on applications or resumes. As an example, one man who was a previous attendee of this class at Branchville Corrections told me that listing his skills only took part of a page. He said, maybe a fourth of a page, John. And I began to ask him some questions. I said, are you a fast learner? Do you have a customer focus? Are you friendly? Are you flexible? Are you creative? Do you have a can-do attitude? Are you able to meet new challenges? Do you have excellent follow-through to get the job done? Are you detail-oriented? Do you work well with others? And are you conscientious? He said, wow, I had never thought about all those things. And those were important qualities that he had never thought were important. Then we'll discuss how to prepare right now for that dreaded job interview. Of the hundreds of potential questions asked by interviewers, we're going to look at 25 of the most common interview questions asked. And we'll go through exactly how you should answer several of those questions that are most often asked. Questions like, tell me about yourself. What are your weaknesses? And several others. Here's some examples. Tell me about yourself. Well, I was born on a dark and stormy night. No, they don't want to hear about the drama in your life. They want to hear how you fit into their organization and if you can do the job as described in the job description. Tell me about your weaknesses. Well, I have a tendency to be late a lot, and sometimes I don't feel like going to work, so I just don't come. No. Never reveal a weakness you have not overcome or had a plan to overcome. Answering like that will get you an automatic elimination for consideration for the job. We will show you more on preparing for the interview by discussing how to role play with a friend at home or maybe in prison to become familiar with answering difficult questions so that you can give a good, well thought out response without fumbling for an answer. One of you assumes the position of the interviewer and the other one, the one seeking employment. And then you switch roles so you can get a lot of practice in how to talk smoothly and impress the interviewer so you'll get a job offer. Next, we'll discuss a lot of detail how to answer the felony question. It's a positive experience that results in a job offer rather than a negative, we're not interested in you. Though the statement, have you ever been convicted of a felony, is starting to be removed from applications, the interview will notice and ask why there are large gaps in your employment history. So the felony issue will come up and must be answered in a positive manner. By the way, never make excuses for your conviction, but take full responsibility and tell the interviewer that you've turned your life around and you've taken courses in prison to show you've changed. In class number 7, entitled 10-Step Prep and Effective Resume Writing, we will continue our study of how to secure suitable employment by preparing for that dreaded interview process by looking at a 10-step interview preparation plan and learning how to write an effective resume. In this class, we'll be covering everything from making good eye contact and smiling while delivering a firm handshake and how to dress for success, to do what to do during the interview to appear professional and confident. Next, we'll go into how to write an effective resume that gets you an interview by using power words to identify your accomplishments. One of the biggest mistakes that resume writers often make is to list what they were responsible for. What the hiring company wants to know is what accomplishments you made while employed. Everyone makes improvements on a job that can be highlighted in a resume. You just have to think back to what contributions you made on that job that you worked on. Use numbers to highlight your accomplishments. Think of the money you saved, the company. Here's an example. Identified a new internet provider that cut the company's online costs by 15%. See? And then think of the time you saved the company. For example, I suggested procedures that decreased the processing time of orders by 10 minutes, or even think amounts. I wrote 25 plans for hiring new people. We'll also provide a sample, a chronological resume showing you how to assemble an impressive resume. In class number 8, entitled Improve Self-Control and Avoiding Thinking Errors, that you see on your screen now, we'll begin to cover the 5th reason for reoffending the men gave. They lacked adequate self-control. This is part 1. In class number 8, we will discuss in detail what self-control is and why some people have an abundance of self-control, while it seems that others just lack an adequate level of it. Self-control can be defined this way. It's the ability of a person to control their emotions, restrain their impulses, and resist their temptations and put a stop to that old bad behavior. We will then cover how you can develop and strengthen your self-control. Also, we'll be covering 10 common thinking errors and how to beat those thinking errors that help us feel better and change some of our negative behavior. In class number 9, entitled Learning to Understand and Control Anger, we will continue to cover that 5th reason for reoffending the men gave. They lacked adequate self-control. This is part 2. And class number 9, we'll take up the subject of learning to control your anger. We'll do this by getting an understanding of why it is we get angry in the first place, and then describe the 4 stages of anger in detail, and then covering how we can go about handling our anger. And lastly, we will delve into various tips and techniques for just recognizing when our anger is reaching that boiling point that we're all familiar with. When we need to implement some procedures to help keep us from losing control and reacting in an unwholesome manner. In class number 10 and 11, we'll cover the subject of overcoming a dysfunctional family background, or upbringing, which was the 6th reason for reoffending, the men said, that caused them to reoffend. They were products of dysfunctional homes that kept them from developing good relationships and learning how to resolve conflict. In class 10, part 1, called Overcoming Dysfunctional Family Background, we will cover negative family influences, how they affect us, and then what we can do to overcome the obstacles in our past caused by a poor upbringing. A dysfunctional family is a family in which conflict, misbehavior, and often child neglect or abuse on the part of parents occurs either continuously or regularly, leading members to accept these actions as a normal way of life. Part of this class will have a little test that you can take to see how you've been affected by a dysfunctional family background. This test is for your eyes only and not to be shared with others. We will also look at 10 ways we can make peace with our past. In class number 11, part 2, we will continue our study of overcoming a dysfunctional family background by taking up the subject of developing better relationships and resolving conflict in friendships and in marriages. In order to develop better relationships, the first thing we're going to have to learn how to do is to communicate more effectively. There's a lot more to communication than just expressing ourselves with words. Many words in the English language have many meanings, so the message may not be understood unless the message is made clearer. Let's take the words, I feel bad. Well, what does that mean? Are you sick? Are you depressed? Do you feel guilty about something? We have to clarify our message by asking questions of each other. We will show you how to go about that so that the message is understood the way it was intended. Strangely enough, it's been found by researchers that we communicate only 7% by words. Think of that. The other 93% of our communication between people is accomplished by the tone of our voice, by gestures like I'm making, body language, facial expression, eye contact, many other things. We'll investigate some of these gestures to get a better idea of how to read what others are really saying and how we can control our gestures. And so that people will really understand what we're saying and we can get positive results when we communicate. You know, our words can be carefully crafted, but our gestures often give us away. Then we'll look at barriers to effective listening and how to do a better job of listening. Our brains are so powerful that we can process information coming to us at a phenomenal rate. When people speak, they speak at the rate of 125 to 250 words a minute. But our brains are so powerful, we can process information we receive at 1,000 words a minute or more than 4 times the verbal rate. So with all that extra time available, we can practice in our heads what we're going to say to that person just as soon as they shut up. So we're not truly listening. We will learn how to shut that tendency off and to truly listen. So we could, that doesn't become a barrier effectively to keep us from listening and cause conflict. And finally, we'll discuss how to handle conflict so that problems are resolved and both members in a relationship feel satisfied with the solution. Every relationship, I don't care whether it's a friendship or a marriage, will undergo stressful periods that will require you to be able to deal with and resolve conflict if that friendship or marriage has a chance of surviving. We will learn the do's and don'ts of working through conflict and how to resolve it. It'll go a long way in resolving conflict by just refraining from using trigger words that offend and tend to lead to arguments, and start using I feel statements rather than you are accusing kinds of statements. For instance, I feel scared, honey, when you drive recklessly. Not, you drive like an idiot. You're going to get us all killed, you fool. See what I mean? In class number 12, entitled Breaking Loose from Your Past, we will cover the 7th and final reason the men gave. They couldn't break free of the stigma of their past. People disrespected them because of being felons. In this final class of Escaping the Revolving Door of Prison, we will show you how you can break free from the stigma of the mistakes you've made in your past that have resulted in guilt and shame and regret that keep you chained and actually controlled by your past. You'll learn how to respond to people who treat you with contempt. Then we'll study briefly the 8 criminogenic risk and need factors that 2 psychologists by the name of Andrews and Bonta found incline previous offenders to be repeat offenders, and what inmates can do to target those risks and needs to reduce the influence these have on them. In this final class, we'll show you that your past history does not define who you are or determine your future choices, but it can be a strong indicator unless you learn from your past and determine to make better choices that you made and learned about in sessions 3 and 4. In conclusion, I want to just say this. I'm sure your head is spinning with all the points we've covered in this video and all the switching going on with the PowerPoint charts. I know my wife is. She's running the equipment. Well, I want to assure you that we'll try to keep our future PowerPoint charts to a minimum in our future sessions, and as we cover each of the major contributors in more depth. So hang in there with us, if you will. But before we end this session, I'd like to give you just a little science lesson that'll help give you some insight into the importance of studying these 7 major contributors to reoffending. If you want to overcome the force of gravity to escape the Earth or the moon's gravitational force, you'll have to be able to reach what is referred to as the escape velocity. For the Earth, that speed is 25,000 miles per hour. For the moon, it's 5,400 miles per hour. Any of you are familiar with that with rockets? That's what they have to reach in order to be able to get out of the atmosphere. There's a formula for calculating that speed. The details of that are not important. But what I want to give you is a formula to escape the revolving door of prison. To escape to reach that escape velocity, let's say for prison, to overcome the gravity on your prison experience to draw you back for another sentence, you'll have to overcome a number of things to break free of the hold on you. You're going to have to overcome the inclination to choose the rebellious direction in life that we all face. You'll need to learn to overcome the negative influences of antisocial friends that we talked about. You'll have to begin to make better decisions and choices based on positive convictions. It'll be necessary to eliminate the addictive influences of drugs and alcohol in your life that rob you of your resources and your energy. And after that, you're going to have to learn how to secure suitable employment through identifying your skills, developing a strong resume, and learning how to answer the questions an interviewer is going to ask. You'll also have to improve your self-control, replace your thinking errors, and develop the ability to control your anger. Then you'll have to overcome the negative influences of a dysfunctional upbringing. It'll be necessary to learn the steps to developing good relationships with others while learning how to resolve conflict with them. And finally, you'll need to learn how to respond appropriately to those who treat you with contempt because of your past. For you to accomplish all of the above through your own effort and without any assistance, I can tell you is practically impossible. That is why we have developed this course of study. Our goal and desire is to equip you with the knowledge and the necessary tools for you to be successful when you're released and never reoffend again. It's our hope you'll continue to watch this YouTube channel to view the entire Escaping the Revolving Door of Prison 12-part series, or to view it on DVDs. If you have any comments or suggestions, please list them in the comments section below, or send them to us at our website contact page, lemasterministries.com. We can access that and get your comments. And this class has been a benefit to you. Please subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below. And not only do that, but invite others to join you as you view this series of classes. Be sure to tune into our next session of Escaping the Revolving Door of Prison, session number 2, entitled Avoiding Antisocial or Bad Friends, when we will be discussing how the friends we choose to spend our time with shape and influence us. This is John LeMaster saying, I'll be looking for you next session.